Good morning, everyone. Mr. Hemant Badri, Senior Vice President, Group Head of Supply Chain and Customer Experience, Flipkart. Mr. Vineet Majgonkar, Member, CII National Committee on Logistics and Chairman, Armstrong Dematic. Mr. Varun Wadhwa, Director, Management Consulting, KPMG in India, and Dr. Bhanumati from CII Institute of Logistics. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 10th edition of e-commerce, retail and packaging with the overall theme, Dynamic E-commerce, Changing Landscape by Behavior. Let me extend a warm welcome to Mr. Hemant Badri and introduce him as well. Mr. Hemant Badri is a Senior Vice President, Group Head of Supply Chain of Flipkart, is a business leader with 22 years of experience in product and e-commerce supply chain with expertise in P&L management, supply chain strategies, E2E end-to-end planning, manufacturing, customer service, network optimization, logistics, and distribution to maximize business results. Welcome to you. I take this opportunity to welcome Mr. Vineet Majgonkar, Member, National Institute of CII and Chairman, Armstrong Dematic. He is featured as a prominent thought leader in the Leadership Code by Economic Times, and known as a prominent innovator in intra-logistics automation and robotics industry. He's been in this high-tech automation business for almost 3 decades. Let me also extend a warm welcome to Mr. Varun Wadhwa, Director of Management Consulting in KPMG. He has over 2 decades of experience in consulting. A few words about CII Institute of Logistics. CII Institute was established by CII as a center of excellence to play a pivotal role in accelerating growth and improve competitiveness in logistics and supply chain sector. CII Institute of Logistics, through its services, improve the supply chain performance to great heights by setting a sustainable ecosystem through stakeholder engagement and global network. The services of CII-IL include education programs. CII Institute of Logistics has certified 100,000 or 1 lakh students and industry professionals in the last 2 decades through various education models. It is partnered with various universities across the country. The content is designed, developed, and delivered by industry professionals. 60% of the learning curriculum is delivered through hands-on training in the industry. CII Institute of Logistics has internationally tied up with LSCM certification programs with Japan, Singapore, and UK. About CII School of Logistics. CII School of Logistics is the first industry-led, industry-managed, and industry-absorbed logistics school in India. The school offers competency-based MBA in logistics, supply chain management, analytics at Amity, Noida, Mumbai, and Kolkata campuses. Over 300 students have passed out and been successfully placed in the industry. It's a very great industry initiative program of which many companies have benefited from this. Technical events and conferences. CII Institute organizes technical events, seminars, conferences, and projects across the country in logistics and supply chain sectors to address required effective policy changes. And then this very prestigious scale awards, Supply Chain and Logistics Excellence Awards. Supply Chain and Logistics Excellence Awards evaluates and recognizes excellent, exemplary, eminent organizations analyzing maturity model, performance metrics in both manufacturing and logistics service sectors. Over the last 9 years that the Scale Awards have been instituted, 2,000 organizations have participated and 700 organizations have won Scale Awards. The other sectoral initiatives of CII include the MOVE, which is Membership of Value Engagement, Warehouse National Network, and Women's Logistic Leadership Program. About this conference, for which all of us are assembled here today, e-commerce, retail, supply chain, and packaging has emerged as a vital and valued business model with the kind of trajectory that it has followed in the recent years. With more scope, this conference analyzes the emerging industry delivery models, technology engines in this digitalization era to reach its fullest potential. Further, the conference also focuses on e-packaging, sustainability, and ESG metrics to drive green supply chain and logistics throughout the country. The theme of this year's e-commerce, retail, and packaging 2023 is dynamic e-commerce, changing landscape of buying behavior. The conference will cover the following sessions. One is Golden Spiral Strategy, Industry Perspective. Second is Leveraging Technologies to Reach New Horizons. And E-commerce Packaging, Pledge to Environment. May I now request Mr. Varun Wadhwa, Director, Management Consulting, KPMG, to deliver the theme address on Dynamic E-commerce, Changing Landscape of Buying Behavior. Mr. Wadhwa.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It feels good to be back in person after many years. I think it's been about 2-3 years where we've done this online, and now we're doing this in person. So it's good to be back. Right, so great. So the presentation's on, and I'm going to talk to you about e-commerce in general in India and talk to you about the patterns and trends that we've been seeing in the e-commerce sector. In addition to that, I'm also going to give you a perspective on what's been happening on the global macroeconomic front, right? And how does that impact the logistics landscape overall in India, and what is in it for us as logisticians, as a sector, right? So just diving straight in, I think before I just get into the details of it, I'd take a moment to thank the CII Institute to kind of trust us with this entire process for the last 8+ years. Special call out to Dr. Bhanumati. She's been a core anchor in this entire process for us as well, where we've kind of come out with a lot of thought leadership reports together. We've kind of come up with a lot of knowledge reports and point of views together. We've also come out with sessions where we've conducted such events in the past for 8+ years, and we've also moderated a lot of speaker sessions and for CII in the past as well. So thank you, Dr. Bhanumati, for trusting with us. And diving straight into the topic now. So 3 areas that we'll talk about today. One is the global macro trend. The second is going to be around Indian logistics sector and what are we seeing out there. And the last is going to be on e-commerce and the emerging plays in e-commerce as well. So going straight up, I think when you look at the macroeconomic dynamics, right, today, where does India stand when you look at the global context? The world order is definitely changing, and India is actually coming out strong in this change in world order, right? Today, while we are looking to be the smaller amongst the 3 that's put up, but we are the fastest growing major economy in the world. And in terms of ranking, today we stand in rank 5. In the next 5 years, we are expected to be the 3rd largest economy, surpassing Japan and Germany as well. What does this mean, right? How is this going to happen as well? So a lot of push around manufacturing, a lot of push around infrastructural development, and all of this translates into money in the hands of consumers like you and me, and which translates into spends in retail. And when you look at our benchmarks, when we to compare to these global economies, right, we are just a fraction when you look at it. And that's where a significant headroom for growth is going to come in, where post this growth, a lot of discretionary spend and this increase in discretionary spend is going to have a phenomenal rippling effect into the logistics sector, the e-commerce sector, and so on and so forth, right? So taking it forward, what does it mean for the logistics sector, right? In the last 5 years, we've almost grown from about $150 billion to about $250 billion today. In the next 5 years, we are expecting this to double. Our growth is going to be at a phenomenal place, especially given that we're going to be having a lot of infrastructural push and push on manufacturing in India. So a lot of global trade is going to happen from here as well. In the context of size and scale, we're the 5th largest transport logistics market now in the world, right? The other uniqueness of our country is that we're quite different from some of these global 4 who are ahead of us, right? Firstly, our industry is quite fragmented, even today, right? Even today, when you look at the trucking community, a lot of single truck user owners who are there in the market, who are kind of operating at a smaller scale, 5 crore, 10 crore revenues, kind of thresholds that these companies are operating at. So still, scale is a far away phenomenon for us. When you look at even our modal mix, right, while we have a lot of dependency on road, globally this is not the case. Today, about 40–50% of our transportation mix is just around road, whereas globally, this number is more like about 20%, 25%. There is a significant balance in the model mix of the global economies, right? So there is an equivalent share of ocean, there is an equal share of rail, and that's also expected to change with a lot of infrastructural development on coastal shipping in India, on dedicated freight corridor, both on the western and eastern side as well, right? And lastly, I think just to talk about value-added services and value creation. Today, a lot of the buying that happens in the logistics sector is still very transactional. A customer is still not looking at value. And one of the key reasons is that historically, the value of the goods that we've ever consumed in the past has always been at a lower threshold. So just to give you an example, in the past, when most of us have been growing up, we would have eaten Amul ice creams, right? That's been an example. But today we have the options to look at Baskin-Robbins, Häagen-Dazs, and so many other brands, which actually are more premium brands and have affordability to pay for better logistics and better quality and better value creation. And that's where the phenomenal transformation is expected in this sector over the years to come. Just to give you some stats, where were we about 5–10 years ago in terms of ocean, air, and road? Our container traffic has doubled, right? About 10 million TEUs to about 20 million TEUs now. But a point here is that even today, Shanghai does almost double one port in China. Shanghai port does almost double the traffic that the entire country does. So Shanghai does about 37 million TEUs alone in a single year, right? When you look at the air cargo traffic, while this is subject to a lot of airlines moving in the country, the take rate of these flights have increased over the past few years, but there has been significant growth in the domestic landscape in the air cargo traffic. Today, when you look at this traffic growing from about 2.5 million TEUs, 2.5 million tons to about 3.2 million tons, there has been, this growth has largely been on the back of the domestic segment, where you've seen a lot of airlines coming in with capacity. So you've seen Indigo adding fleet, you've seen SpiceJet adding fleet, Vistara coming in. So a lot of belly space has kind of helped increase this capacity. As a result of volumes come up there. Other point is road, right? We spoke about it earlier, about 60% dominance in the transportation mix. And that's increasing over a period. I mean, it's just kind of going up phenomenally. So if you look at pre-COVID as well, the number was closer to about, it's about 4 million, 4 crores e-way bills were generated, and now this volumes come up to almost about 9 crore e-way bills, right? So that kind of talks about the phenomenal growth that we're seeing even in the road sector. When you look at the ranking, right, I think India today is now being recognized by all key stakeholders, and these key stakeholders being investors, being global operators, and the government as well, right? In the past, there's not been a lot of focus in this sector, but now it's being recognized and there's a lot of appreciation for this sector. So if you think about our rankings, we've almost grown 16 positions in the last 10 years. We are expected to be the 25th, we are expected to rank 25 in the Logistics Performance Index by 2030. This is the goal that's been set out by the National Logistics Policy that's come out last year. When you look at the transformation that's happened in the sector in between 2010 2015 and now, I'd like you to picture this, right? 2010, let's look at an example of warehousing as an infrastructure. It's very close to e-commerce, and hence I picked warehousing. 2010, you would see go downs, right? You would never have imagined the kind of infrastructure that we have. Small places with about 5,000, 10,000 square feet, limited lighting, ventilation, no scope for value creation. The boxes were just kept in and moved out, kind of a setup that was there on warehousing. 2015 starts the e-commerce boom. We start having larger boxes, 1.5 lakh square feet, 2 lakh square feet. Scales coming into play. Global investors are coming into this sector. They're seeing potential. And today we have so many companies who are kind of out there, who are investing in the warehousing space, who are developing great infrastructure, grade A and grade A plus infrastructure as well, right? All the fulfillment centers today you see is about 5 lakhs square feet plus kind of area that's coming up from now on onwards. So that's been a transition from infrastructural standpoint. Of course, from IT, we had very limited penetration early on. We started with some basics of WMS, TMS, and now we are talking about AI, ML, and robotics as well. And the third point is our operators, right? Between 2010 and 12, I couldn't think of any large names. I mean, any of these companies out here whom we're talking to were not really big in scale, right? But come 2014 onwards, we've seen a lot of Indian companies going global, including TVS, including All Cargo Logistics, Mahindra Logistics. All of them are growing global and are also being recognized globally. So delivery as well, right? We are building world-class companies in some sense or the other. And expecting this is just going to go on and on, where we're going to have much more counts of champions of the sector in the years to come by. So shifting gears to e-commerce sector, right? I think now we've recognized this, that post-COVID, e-commerce has now become a way of life for most of us. Between 2017, 18, 19, I remember I've done a lot of work in this sector. There was always a question on the sustainability of this sector, given the lack of profitability, whether there was a potential, whether there was going to be penetration into tier 2, tier 3 markets. But I think we know now post-COVID that this is a reality. This is a way of shopping, and this is only going to kind of grow over the years to come, because this is only going to be a generational shift from time to time. So if you look at the statistics, globally, the e-commerce market today is about $5 trillion, expected to grow at about $7 trillion. And India is at a very small fraction to this number. We are only about $65 billion, right, when you look at it. In terms of volume, today China does about 110 billion shipments a day, and we do only about 4 billion shipments a day. And just to give you another interesting stat, there's a day called a Singles Day in China that's been celebrated for e-commerce, right? So it's a sale day. In a single day, they clock shipment volumes that we clock in a year, almost. And you can now imagine the scale difference that we are operating between China and in India. Population size is the same. We of course have the potential with our per capita increasing over a period of time. Just to also give you another anecdotal stat is this penetration of e-commerce in the overall scheme of retail, right? Today, our retail market is small when you compare to the likes of US and China. We are only about 1 trillion in terms of retail market. And e-commerce is just a penetration of about 7%. So again, that also gives you an indication that how much of a headroom is there to kind of grow in this sector for all the e-commerce players as well. So just to give you some more statistics and drivers of growth for what's happening in India. Today, the volume is at about, when I started to look at this sector, right, the volume were at a really small scale. We were only seeing about 1.5 lakh shipments per day that companies were clocking. And move forward to what we are at today. Annually, we are doing about 4 billion shipments a year. And this is only going to grow to about 10 billion in the next 5 years. The key point to note, how is this growth happening? What are the drivers of growth, right? As I mentioned in the previous slide as well, the question was always around this tier 2, tier 3 market growing. Historically, we only felt that about 65 to 100 million part of the population of the country was buying into the e-commerce sector, which was largely living in the metro and tier 1 city. But we've seen that shift happening. We started to see a lot of tier 2, tier 3 brands, tier 2, tier 3 parts of the country kind of seeing a significant uptake in volume. And thanks to COVID, right, to be honest, I think that's been the real transformational time where they've seen a pickup in demand in the e-commerce space. So what has happened when with this growth, right? So I think interestingly, the commodity profile also that's been kind of transacted has been evolving. When e-commerce started, it was largely around limited to books. That was a proposition with what Flipkart started with, right? Then came Amazon. There was a big push around electronics. We saw a lot of boom in the electronics shipments that were happening. Then came fashion. We had companies like Myntra, et cetera, that came, and fashion picked up significantly. And today, when you look at it, there is growth in electronics, there is growth in fashion, but guess what? There's a lot of growth also in grocery, right? Regular items that you and I consume, there is a lot of growth there. There's a lot of growth in business, in beauty and personal care products. So there is a good diversification of product mix also that we are seeing. So and that is generally healthy for the industry, right? Where you're seeing that the consumer is generally going out there to shop online for all kinds of commodities. He or she is not limiting themselves to only a set of product category. And to add to this, I think there has also been some interesting models of plays that have emerged, right? Which is kind of only adding value to the whole scheme of things. When you look at the historical method of Flipkart and Amazon, the way of buying was very, you could just look at the product, the image of the product, and you made a judgment call. But today, with social commerce emerging, with a lot of these D2C brands depending on social commerce and other models, there's a good sense that is being given to the customer. So, for example, in a social commerce channel, there is a demonstration of the product, right? If someone is trying to kind of buy apparel, someone is actually demonstrating it and putting up a video to give you a sense of how the product will look, how the product will feel. Further to that, also now you're looking at companies like Amazon, who are also including technologies where you include your full-scale picture, and you can superimpose the product on your picture, and you get a sense on how the product will look at you, and it gives you a perspective on the size, etc. Right? So all of these technologies have actually started to help the whole sector, the boom that's been happening in this sector. So moving forward, I think with those challenges, with those growth drivers, there also are some challenges that we're seeing, of course. The first one being sustainability. I think it's an important topic. I'm personally glad we all are talking about it today. Right? Today, imagine the amount of packages that even keep coming to our respective houses, and it's just sheer waste. To give you an interesting stat, while I was kind of creating this report, I came across an interesting stat saying that one shipment that comes to your house is equivalent to as good as 25 to 30 shipments that you would have probably gone and procured from a retailer, right? I mean, that is the kind of emission that you are generating by just ordering one product. And I think this is only going to be a thing that companies have to look out for on how they can kind of solve for it. Nearly 45% of the emission, if you look at the contributors in the entire value chain of e-commerce logistics, I think packaging is a key contributor. It's about 40-45% of the emissions that are generated. And secondly, I think it's reverse logistics, which is about 25-30%. Many of us do it. We order shipments, we order e-commerce apparel items, and we kind of return it with limited thinking on how does it impact the environment. And I think even companies like Amazon are starting to think consciously about it and put in curbs and limitations so that this is not really impacting the environment the way it is currently, right? Secondly, operational bottlenecks. So this sector of e-commerce logistics is a very intense sector, right? I think for any e-commerce company, the logistics partner is actually the face of the brand in some sense. And it's a very intense sector where you have to ensure your SLAs are met, you're delivering the products on time, And it's a very human sector where the last mile delivery guy is the key in the entire scheme of things. And we've seen recently, right, with the Blinkit example on how operations got suffered if the backbone of the entire chain was kind of disrupted. So it's an entire challenge on how companies are looking to solve for this around the operational piece of delivering goods. The third point is around complexities in supply chain, right? We've seen with the emergence of new models or new channels, there are new supply chains that are emerging. So earlier, the movements were very simple. They used to come from a fulfillment center to a distribution center and to a customer. Now you have things like a dark store where things are coming from somewhere really close to your house, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, within a radius of 5 kilometers. There are also models where companies are actually picking up products from a Kirana store and delivering it to you, right? So there are a lot of interesting models that are coming in, and it's a complex supply chain that we have to kind of solve for, and only technology is going to help us in this entire process, but it is something that we have to watch out for on how we embed technology in the entire process of delivering value to customers. And last, I think just to kind of add this point is around pricing pressure, right? This is always going to be a challenge. Cost is always going to be a concern. When this sector started out in India, the per shipment, the delivery value was at about 100 to 120 rupees per kg. And from then and now, the cost has only come down. And it's almost become at about 60, 65 rupees per kg, right? So that gives you an indication on the significant pressure that's happened. All of the challenges that we spoke about, all of those have to be addressed with pricing pressure remaining all the time, right? I think that until the time companies like Amazon or Flipkart or any other e-commerce platform is not going to make money, they're not really going to let their logistics partners to extract a significant value from the entire process, right? So moving forward, just a slide on giving you a perspective on how many of the global companies are looking to solve, right? There are essentially what they've done is that they've identified 4 themes of challenges, right? Companies like DHL, FedEx, DB Schenker, and these are the 4 themes that they are really solving for. For example, social change. We're seeing a lot of change around how the gig economy is coming into play, how the shared economy is coming into play. How can that be leveraged in the whole delivery ecosystem? Of course, there are regulatory challenges around it, but that's the point, that we have to work with the government to solve for it, because this is not just a small challenge. It is a structural challenge in the entire social dynamics that we see in the country, right, or in the world, in fact. The second one is around technology. Of course, we've heard about AI, ML. We are also talking about drone delivery, robotics, and whatnot. I'm not sure whether it's going to happen in the next 5 years, but it's going to happen. In some way or the other, it's going to happen in some part of the world, and eventually it's also going to come to India, right? May not be for every small product that we see, but it is a reality which is going to come into play at some point of the time. So I think this is something that companies are also being conscious of and are being very alert on how to kind of address this, right? So companies like Swiggy have already started to do some drone testing, Blue Dart, for example, as well. The third sphere that I'd like to talk about is around customer centricity, the most important element in the entire process, right? Today, how do you kind of keep the customer constantly engaged? Because today, it's also a fight between platforms and channels, right? Today, if Amazon misses to deliver on its SLAs on a few shipments, customers willing to switch without thinking twice, right? And this challenge still persists to be now. It will continue to be for some more time, unless companies are able to really create a value proposition which is really sticky to hold the customer together in the entire process. The last one is going to be around regulation, right? It's a complex element. We have started to see a lot of elements around regulation where countries are talking about how environmental damage these companies are, like Amazon, etc., right? How are they kind of going to ensure there is focus on ESG and sustainability in the entire process of delivery to customers? There is also around taxation, right? Because companies, especially when you look at the cross-border trade in e-commerce, there is a significant push by various governments, not just the Indian government, but I'm talking about European governments, the US government, who's kind of trying to squeeze the taxation element out of it so that there is some value created for local companies that are there, right? So there's always going to be a battle between the brick and mortar and e-commerce in that perspective. So just to sum up the entire presentation that I've had today, right? I think sustainability is always going to be key, and companies are going to look for means and measures. So we've seen in India, Flipkart, Amazon, all of them focusing on EVs at this point of time. And I think that's just one part of sustainability that they're focusing on. So last mile transformation into EVs, that's great. But what about packaging? What about reverse logistics? How do you kind of limit all of that in the entire process? So sustainability is really an important element that companies have to watch out for. The second point is going to be around this whole shift in trend, right? We are seeing that the customer is also getting demanding over a period of time. They expect delivery in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So there is going to be a balance between the delivery timelines and also where the products are going to be delivered from. Because of course, this number of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes is not sustainable for a very long time. I think there is going to be some rationality there, and also what we're going to see that these products are not necessarily going to come out from far off distances. There's always going to be a dependency on something that's nearby, and hyperlocal is going to play a very important role in the entire process, right? The third part is around the rate of technology adoption and robotics, right? We are going to see that happen. I think we're already seeing that happening in the fulfillment centers, a lot of technology interventions happening around there. We are also going to see some of it in some time over the next 5-8 years, even in delivery sides as well, right, where we will see robotics in play. The fourth one is going to be around the regulation part of it. I spoke about it in the previous slide, but industry is definitely going to be even more regulated, because today, even in India, today, if you look at how our retail structure is set up, right, there is still a large dependency on the SMEs, right? And they are a big contributor to the overall growth of the economy. So the government is trying its best to kind of ensure the interests of these SMEs are kind of maintained. And that's why we have ONDC that's come in, right? That's why there will be interventions from the government side that will ensure that either there is enough opportunities created for SMEs, or there is regulatory hurdles that are created for these large companies in some sense. And the last point is, we spoke about it again in the previous slide, but pricing pressure is always going to remain. It is a reality, and I think the key is going to be how value is created with consciousness on price throughout the period, right? So that's just a limited point of view from me on the e-commerce and e-commerce logistics. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Varun. May I now request Mr. Vineet Madgaonkar, Member CIA National Institute of Logistics and Chairman Armstrong Dematic, to deliver address on reimagining intra-logistics.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to meet you once again after 3 years in person. I'm indeed pleased to be here. Thank you, Varun, for a fantastic overview on macroeconomics, consumer behaviors, e-commerce, and the brick and mortar. I think that was a very well-rounded, and I don't think he has left anything for us to speak about on the macros. So, as we speak today, we have a great opportunity to reimagine intralogistics. I'm very specific to intralogistics because that is my field of expertise, and I would stick to that. So pre-COVID, we had a situation where we had the world economy was like, I mean, let's take US as a reference, where Amazon, for instance, had penetrated about 16% in the US market. In India, I think even today, after COVID, we are at about 6-7% of e-commerce. That leaves us a whole lot of headroom. But when COVID came, The same 16% of Amazon, I mean, it took them, let's say, what, 93, 94 to 2020, from, let's say, 0 to 16% was the growth, was the penetration. But from March of 2020, towards the end of 2020, Amazon had increased their share to almost 29%, from 16 to 29. So 0 to 16, it takes like 15 years, and then about 10 months from 16% to 29%. During this period, during the period of COVID, there were two ways. One is e-commerce. Yes, that was a compulsion due to the lockdowns. We had to order things online, and that was a good kind of propellant to increase e-commerce. There were in the innovation curve, people who normally are towards the right side of the curve, the followers or the laggards, they were also pushed to adopt e-commerce, and that kind of gave the taste of e-commerce to a wide range of audience. That's how COVID has helped e-commerce. But during COVID, let us accept that our planet wobbled. The earth wobbled. It's not the same again. Now, post-COVID, the trend that we have seen, especially in the last year, if we may officially say that 2022 was practically the end of COVID in the mass sense, then we have seen a behavior of people also going back to some of their old habits. Some bit of purchasing went on a kind of a revenge buying in terms of going back to the brick and mortar. So while e-commerce companies, their revenues almost doubled, the demands doubled during COVID period, and in the intralogistics establishment, they increased their capacities by 60, 70%. But post-COVID, once the purchasing style of the people kind of fell back to its pre-COVID, or not pre-COVID, but it's definitely better than that. But when people started going back to the brick and mortar, in the intralogistics automation segment, we saw a little bit of stagnation in 2022. So the investments shrunk to almost 20-25% of what they would otherwise would have been. And quite rightly so, because I think the e-commerce companies are the most nimble, even at their massive size of Flipkarts and Amazon. They can quickly tune themselves to the markets, to the demands. And as we see today, for the last, I would say in the last month and a half, we are seeing the automation demand coming back to where it was pre-COVID. I wouldn't say again COVID, because in COVID we had a surge of automation demand. So the capacities that the e-commerce companies had increased by 60-70%. Today we see they're still a bit underutilized. I mean, last season I believe that, Hemanji would have exact numbers of it, but I believe that about 10-15% of the installed capacities were underutilized. And this is the year where those underutilized capacities might be caught up, and we might see some more increase beyond those capacities. That is where we believe that e-commerce is caught up to its natural kind of curve of growth when it had a spike during COVID. And this growth right now is a very healthy growth. One thing that we learned from what happened in the last 3 years is that uncertainty is here to stay. I don't think that we must live in our own paradise that uncertainty is gone forever. I think we must embrace that uncertainties. And businesses who are able to embrace it and actually tune themselves to those uncertainties, I think will grow better. So what doesn't change? One thing doesn't change, and that is customer experience. We spoke about this 5 or 6 years ago. We spoke about it during COVID. We are speaking about it after COVID. And I think that this word will stay until we have consumers buying things and expecting a certain amount of customer experience. The definition of customer experience, however, has been changing. So it was different pre-COVID, different during COVID, and it's going to be different after COVID. And if I may take a long shot at where this is all heading to, I'll go back to a word which I've been constantly talking about for the last 6-7 years, is omnichannel. And if we think that there is, so when that would happen, whether it is 3 years, 5 years, I don't think that it will happen so soon. But maybe 7 years, 10 years is the time frame when we shall see that omnichannel starts becoming a reality. We can say that today with confidence because we have seen the kind of digital revolution that our country has made in the past 7 or 8 years, and this has become a benchmark for the world. And what is omnichannel? Well, I used to talk about omnichannel, that this is the fusion of the physical and the virtual world, and the delivery system. You can buy online and return offline. You can buy something while you are boarding your flight and get it delivered to the resort that you're heading to, so on and so forth. But now I realize something different. First of all, I believe that omnichannel is not a delivery system, but omnichannel is a consumer mindset. And we as industry professionals, if we honor that consumer mindset of omnichannel, we might be able to tune in our delivery systems to that mindset. So omnichannel is not something that we as a delivery system do to the customer, but it is what we allow the omnichannel mindset of a customer to do to us. That's how we must look at it, and that's where the customer centricity comes into the picture. So who wins in this omnichannel? Does the e-commerce win? Does the brick and mortar win? But by definition, omnichannel is a melting pot of all of these trends and technologies coming together. So over a period of the next 5 to 10 years, what one can see is that there's an interesting trend that we saw during the post-COVID period, that while the capex investments in e-commerce companies in 2022 were slightly slow compared to the previous year, we saw a growth trend in the traditional FMCG. For want of a better word, I will use the word traditional. But they are no more traditional. So they tasted the e-commerce during the COVID period. E-commerce kind of dislodged them from their traditional mindset. E-commerce pushed them to think about developing their own infrastructure to directly cater to the man on the street or the woman on the street. And with that, we as intralogistics, robotics, and automation solution providers are seeing an interesting trend wherein the chunk of e-commerce business that we as solution providers had a degrowth on was actually made up by the brick and mortar traditional FMCG companies. And these traditional FMCG companies have been investing heavily. Due to the NDAs, I may not be able to speak about their names, but the trends are they are moving away from the traditional distributor approach to a direct-to-retail. That's the first stage that we are seeing. So they are consolidating their capacities. Immediately after the GST, there were some companies which did it before GST, others who followed after GST, and almost all of them are following after COVID. They are coming up with large facilities. So about 6 years ago, when people would approach us and say that, we are coming up with a large warehouse, would you automate it for us? And our sales team, some of them are here, they would typically assume that this is going to be somewhere in the range of 50,000 to 70,000 square feet. And then every year it doubled. And today, as we speak, when some customer approaches us and says that, we are coming up with a large facility, we take it for granted that this is going to be somewhere in between or above 5 lakhs, ideally 1 million square feet. So that is today's definition of a large facility. And we have seen this change in a very short time frame of last 6-7 years. As we all know, India did its first $1 trillion of a GDP in 70 years. So 2007 was our first $1 trillion. We did the next trillion in just 7 years, that is 2014. And the next trillion in just 5 years, that is 2019. And there is a recent article or a research report published by Deutsche Bank on why India will be a $7 trillion economy by 2030. It's a very interesting report. So when the nation is moving at such a fast pace, we as people catering to the consumers of this country have to also gear up at that fast pace. We are talking about platforms, the software platforms which can, so we've seen Meesho platform last year actually outperformed Amazon's numbers, and that was a rude shock that the industry had. I don't know, it's exciting that the plates are changing. I don't know whether I should call it a rude shock, but yes, this is a fact. And such platforms which kind of help businesses directly go to customers might come into play. Taobao has been one big one in China. Of course, I think Flipkart has been toying with the idea and extending their platforms for trading from businesses to direct customers. The FMCGs that I spoke of who are going direct to retail, they have their own platforms coming up. But I believe that platform is a patch in the sky. I think what this country needs is an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure. I don't know who makes it, whether it's going to be some private company who already has a critical mass on their platform, who can robustly scale into an infrastructure, or whether it's going to be the government of India. I can't underestimate them now. But there is a demand or a need of this digital infrastructure which enables buying, selling, and the entire logistics piece. So when an Instacart truck starts from location A to location B, it is agnostic to what it is loaded with, whether it may be loaded with the Flipkart stuff or even with Amazon stuff. It's completely neutral to that. That's the kind of infrastructure that one can imagine when the world is kind of melting into that omni-channel future. When we look at the Indian GDP, we see some specific points, although Varun has covered almost all of it, but some specific points that I wish to mention here. When we look at automating warehouses, we have this magic number of 4,000 USD per capita. That is a tipping point where we see the nations start inclining heavily towards automation. Not heavily, but at least they start inclining towards automation. We, India, are at just $2,300, $2,500 per capita. But the Indian economy has got 3 economies within the same economy. So if you look at let us remove the top 1%, which are the HNIs, and they are at par with the HNIs of the world, and let's keep them aside. Among the remaining 99% of India's population, about 50 million people are at par with Europe, about $44,000, $45,000 euros per annum of a per capita GDP. So this is what you're looking at, about 50 million people. About 450 million people are like Far East, Indonesia, which is about 9,000, 9,600 per capita. And well, the remaining 900 odd million are the sub-Saharan African kind of an economy. So India, basically, when it comes to its buying power, it can be more or less blocked into these 3 kind of subgroups. And then depending upon what value prop each of our delivery system is offering, I think, so which customer we are looking at, that is the value prop that our delivery system should offer. We are seeing interesting trends since the last 5 years from tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 cities, especially for the lack of good shopping experience in these towns, I would say, not even cities. E-commerce has a big opportunity in them, although the current business is mostly focused around India's top 10, top 15 cities, but I think majorly the trend should move towards tier 3, tier 4. There we see a natural fit. What is the technology stack for all this ecosystem that we just spoke of? And recently Gartner came up with the new jargon. The management people like you always come up with great words that we call jargon, but it's great. So it is, multi-agent orchestration platform. And what is this? Well, very humbly, we used to call it the WCS, the warehouse control system. But multi-agent orchestration platform extends the definition of a WCS much beyond what is our traditional sense of WCS. So this multi-agent orchestration platform basically enables one to plug in universal hardwares and softwares through APIs into a single kind of a platform. So I'm still using the word platform, but I'll be happy to see the day when this platform actually translates into an infrastructure, as I said earlier. And then what makes sense in automation is still, in India, what makes sense is some V's that we talk about. So if you're handling high volume, if you're handling high variety, if you're handling high value items, either of these three, or a combination of these three, then automation starts becoming a compelling case in India. And as you can see, e-commerce does all the three at one time. Another challenge that e-commerce has, especially in terms of its intralogistics, is the seasonality. The trends that we've seen, which are very difficult to address, very genuinely difficult to address, are that suddenly, for a short period of your 2 to 3 weeks' time, you have to process about 5 to 7 times of your regular average, throughputs. And how do you prepare yourself for that? And that is where perhaps the concept of multi-agent orchestration platforms or infrastructures, basically the shared infrastructures of delivery systems, that would come into picture, where the delivery organizations become agnostic to the brands they're catering to, irrespective of the fact to which brand they belong to. Then there has been a big debate about fixed automation and flexible automation. This is, again, a debate which has been built up. I don't see a big point in that, because fundamentally, automation should ultimately bring value to the customer. You cannot slot that, okay, let's go with a piece of flexible automation or fixed automation. In fact, there is nothing like fixed automation and flexible automation. At the most, we can call it flow automation and a point-to-point automation. So the traditional technologies of automation, whether it may be conveyor-based, whether it may be things like cross-belt sorters, these are flow technologies. These are a continuous flow technologies. It's like a stream of water. Whereas the AMRs are like a point-to-point technology. They pick and drop and pick and drop. And then you could have the autonomous mobile robot as a vehicle, as a base system, and you could have, or rather we have, its functional attachments on top of it. We have seen, and we raised this point about 7 years ago when the world was using the shelf-to-person technologies. And you had AMRs which would pick up the shelf and bring it to the picker. And honestly, we at Armstrong had a bit of objection to that for 2 reasons. One is that there can be only one Hanuman on this planet who picked up the Meru Parvat and got the Sanjeevani. But you can't have 200 Hanumans in one campus, especially picking up 650 kilos, bringing it to a picker who on an average picks only 200 grams out of that shelf at the rate of just 1.5 picks per shelf presented to the picker, and then the entire 650 kilos goes back into the storage. But well, we were seen as fools about 7 years ago. From that, fortunately, the technology has evolved now to tower pick systems, wherein the same autonomous vehicle now can walk into the aisles, pick 10 totes at a time from various locations, and present those 10 totes to the picker. And in that now you've almost got, in a single trip of the AMR, you achieve about 15 picks, 12 to 15 picks. But still, that is also point-to-point technology. The point-to-point technologies make sense when you are scaling typical range that we have seen is from 3,000 packages per hour to about 10,000 packages per hour. Below 3,000 in India, it doesn't make sense. Globally, it makes sense even at 3,000 also. But in India, it gives you an opportunity. So until 3,000, you have different technologies. You have the flow technologies, which are the lower scale technologies. From 3,000 to 8,000 parcels per hour, you have some more flow technologies. But then if you know that your DC is going to scale up, you rather use that AMR piece as a bridge between 3,000 to about 8 to 10,000 parcels per hour. But our observation is that, and having served several proposals into the industry, that beyond 10,000 parcels per hour, the point-to-point technologies, that is the AMRs, the mobile robots, they don't become viable. They don't remain viable anymore. Beyond 10,000 parcels per hour, we again go back to the derby horses of the flow technologies. And today we are going to unveil one such product which we have come up with just after my address. And so if you're looking at 40,000, 50,000 parcels per hour, then sorry to say, but the point-to-point technologies still have their own limitations. Let us look at what lies a little bit for the future. I think that, as I said, there's a big opportunity for audience here, those who are in the platform space, to grow into that infrastructure if the Indian government doesn't already outperform the others and due to its own regulatory powers. And I think, but again, those who make good use of predictive analytics for predicting business, big data for predicting business, I think that is precisely where the real win lies. And let's all today say that let omnichannel happen to us rather than we making it happen to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinit. May I now request you to launch the product Polaris HT, the double-decker cross-belt sorter, a game-changing solution revolutionizing logistics. With its dual sorting levels, it maximizes space and boosts efficiency.
Yeah, so I'll thank you, Mr. Shankar. I'll invite Ratnesh Mishra. Ratnesh is our program manager for sortation solutions. And he's actually a rocket scientist. He worked with ISRO. He's launched a satellite. And then he also developed our cross-belt sorters. And I think I'll leave to Ratnesh to explain this. And I'll request Hemanji to unveil this new high-throughput workhorse, as I was saying. And yeah, over to Ratnesh to explain it. And
thank you so much, Vinay, for this opportunity. So first request Hemant sir to unveil this first, and then we'll discuss on.
yeah.
So this way, please.
So as you all know, cross-belt sorters are pretty big in size. So we just have a representative picture here to unveil.
Thank you so much, and a big round of applause. Thank you.
Actually, this was inspired by Hemanji. He visited our factory last year and said that, hey guys, can you do something like this? And here we are.
Thank you. Yeah. So first of all, very good morning, and thank you so much for providing this opportunity to discuss about the new and innovative product developed, Polaris HT. So Armstrong Dematic Cross-Belt Sorter is a one-stop shop for basically parcel in-feed, scanning, weighing, sorting, with a huge range of throughput. And now, a good news and good time to see new heights with Polaris HT reaching to a 48,000 parcels per hour, which is nowhere compared to any other sorting technology. And also it makes me proud and feel happy to share one of the unique feature of dual induction on the single cell, which is even leading to further going beyond 48K. So changing conventional cross-belt sorters to this Polaris HT leads to a unique and versatile solution with a best compact footprint and a faster ROI. And modular design of two-tier chutes also helps for a smoother parcel transfer from top to ground and connecting to a single destination, optimizing the required manpower for it. The seamless integration with WMS gives us a higher visibility and productivity, which is also leading to a 1 million parcel handling on a daily basis with the intelligent business involved in it. So transporting goods safely and gently with having a variety of parcels, type, size, surface, leads and makes Polaris HT a one complete and fully automated solution for the warehouse and intralogistic systems. So a big cheers and congratulations to Armstrong Dematic family for this continuous and consistent innovative spirit and developing for this Polaris HT. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for taking us through this product. May I now request Mr. Hemant Badri, Senior Vice President, Group Head of Supply Chain and Customer Experience, Flipkart, to deliver the address on New Age Supply Chain, Democratizing E-commerce for India.
Thanks, CI Logistic and my fellow panelists. I'll just talk about few perspective, and the first is I think we are living in the most exciting time ever for this country post-independence, and I feel far more optimistic for few reasons, and I'll just talk about that. I think we have seen the internet revolution in this country. Okay, if you talk about how we have made it accessible, available, affordable to every Indian. If you talk about today, all of us, and many of us might not be Gen Z, and we have seen this transformation of digital India. I think the government and the industry partnership, which is a true reflection, where we have 840 million users on the internet, and that's the first massive transformation. If you talk about UPI and digital wallet, we have 500+ million users on the UPI doing any transaction. Yeah. Coming back to e-commerce, if you talk about e-commerce, what we are trying to solve is not digitizing the commerce, it is transforming the commerce, which is very, very important. We were in the era we were trying to digitize, use technology to really see what we can improvise processes, automation. Today we are living in the era which is transforming. And what I mean by transforming, it is quantum jump from the where we do a commerce. Okay, and just think about a reach. Today e-commerce reaches every possible pin code in this country. What is that e-commerce is trying to solve? It is trying to solve accessibility, affordability, availability. If you are able to address this question fundamentally, you would see how it is different. Okay, so if you talk about how India is different than China, US, and all developed market, we are an economy which is driven by MSMEs. We are an economy which is driven by Kirana stores, and fundamentally, e-commerce has to complement and augment this ecosystem. It cannot create a new ecosystem. So fundamentally, what e-commerce and we as a Flipkart trying to solve is how we can empower the millions of MSMEs by really using the digitization platform and connecting millions of customers. So fundamentally, that's what we are trying to solve, and we are coexisting and unlocking with Kirana ecosystem. So if you look at can we use Kirana ecosystem as a delivery partner? Can we look at really creating financial independence? Can we really help MSMEs to understand entire value chain of product creation to catalog to performance management, how they can actually get a digital literacy deployed in their business so that they don't need physical infrastructure. So with time, many places, physical infrastructure limitation is going away. The logistic infrastructure is far, far faster evolving. If you look at road infrastructure, the way our tolls used to happen few years before and how it is happening. So it's a right time for this country to create an impact and create the sustained economic growth and create the empowerment. So that makes me very, very optimistic where we are. And good part is this economy is a consumption-led economy. We have 1.4 billion population. We are a consumption-led economy, and it'll continue to grow. Yeah, it's about penetration. We've talked about, Varun touched upon penetration. Vinit talked about automation. So I'll talk about first how e-commerce is getting reimagined in this country, and what are the fundamental drivers for that. Okay, the first is kind of an infrastructure, and we've talked about whether it is logistical infrastructure, logistical park, the grade A or grade A plus warehouses. I think every company and looking at very, very different value creation at footprint. Today, if we talk about at Flipkart, we have a 1 million plus fulfillment center, reasonable level of automation, and that's automation for very unique portfolio what India handles. Our portfolio, our habits, our consumptions are very, very different than West. Okay, so typically the average value of product, the kind of product we really use. So I think most important thing you would see is grade warehouse infrastructure is improving, and now we talk about 2 million box equivalent to a 40 football court, very, very automated. We're talking about all the automation unique to India. So that's the first trend you should observe. What it is happening on the entire logistic infrastructure and a fulfillment center infrastructure. Second piece is all about technology, yeah, and how do you see that change happening? So if you talk about consumer and the personalizations today, basis your buying habit, e-commerce is a unique place to give you a different selection. So you will see few million selection easily available at your fingertips. And when you search, the way it helps you to identify basis your buying pattern, basis your consumption pattern, what really suits you. I think what it unlocks is the physical limitation of a store. It unlocks you a physical limitation of everything to be at one location from an inventory point of view. Those are really value disruption for the country and economy. So it's not about replacing a particular trend. So I think when you talk about a very unique selection of a particular sari available all across the country, possibly to keep physical inventory is practically impossible. So e-commerce helps you to get the kind of wide selection, and it just empowers every possible MSMEs to be available or the artisans to have their own entrepreneurial journey. So e-commerce helps to really every person to aspire, and it actually drives every Indian's dream to be having his own business. That's our core ethos, to be innovative and differentiated. So I think personalization, wide range of selection, and every person can aspire to get a particular product, whichever part of the country he lives. Second aspect is technology, how technology is disrupting, and we hear that. And I would say that all of us as a business leader and logistics supply chain professional, we need to really build solutions for India, for Indian needs, and locally build. And I feel proud to see how, say, Armstrong is trying to build a solution for the country. I think our needs are very different. Our affordability structures are very different. So we need to innovate. So innovation is fundamental to what we do. Whether it is app innovation, whether it is supply chain innovation, every places, if you look at the last mile delivery person when he travels, there are a huge amount of trust marker. There is huge amount of geo-fencing, geo-tracking, really locational identification. If he has delivered in the past, it gives a confidence level for him. So can we make it very less human dependent, and we can use technology with geotagging, geofencing, digi-locks, and there is enough and more technology and disruption happening with blockchain, with IoT, with massive data. Okay, that's the biggest differentiation. And all these solutions today, what we build, we believe that innovation is the only way to move forward, and technology is an enabler. How do you really solve real life problem through technology is what I would say possibly that's one thing which will differentiate versus many of the West countries. I think thirdly, if you talk about kind of opportunity. We've talked about really we have Flipkart as a platform has 450 million plus user, and that's the kind of value it creates for a people. And as we talked about, as the adoption increase, penetration increase, it is going to help MSMEs to a Kirana partner. Like say 40% of our delivery, we could deliver closer to 4 to 5 million deliveries a day. 40% of them are delivered by Kirana ecosystem partners. So it is helping the country to build a marketplace which lives on our ethos and our principles of connect. Kirana knows the locality, he knows the family, he would be far better to connect. The convenience and the definition of convenience is changing. Okay, it's the deliveries are day one, day two. You get end-to-end experiences today. You get delivery done, you get demo done, you get installation done. If post-cycle, you get product exchanges done. And that's what is possible with technology. And that's the way with e-commerce, further e-commerce is evolving. So I think we are living in a very exciting time. I think also, I believe all of e-commerce and entire ecosystem has to be far more responsible and sustainable. Possibly every fulfillment center has to be through a solar powered and use of EV. I think we have to lead that transformation. For 50% of our fulfillment center gives you huge amount of opportunity to have solar energy, and the technology every year the cost is getting to a half, and helping to improvise speed and efficiency. So I think our responsibility continues to be a sustainable. I think for us, we have 100% of our fulfillment network works on a green packaging. We've signed off with Canopy for Good to make sure that we don't source any of our packaging material which impacts endangers forests. So I think fundamentally use of green energy, all the warehouses are fully powered by electrical energy. We get IGBC certification for those facilities, and that's important. I think e-commerce is disrupting in terms of the EV adoption, whether it is three-wheelers, two-wheelers, and it has its huge amount of, and I've seen it in last few years, the kind of quantum leap EV has taken in this country. There are some problems we need to solve. The partnership, it's changing. I mean, I would say we have closer to 3,000 plus EV vehicles just in the last mile, yeah? And the time is not far that, we will have a lot of them 100% EV. So fundamentally, I believe that whether it is e-commerce or any commerce has to be built very sustainably, whether it is packaging, whether it is total waste management, recycle processes, entire commitment on net zero. I think we've committed as a Flipkart group that stage 1, stage 2 impact on the environment, we want to make it zero by 2030. So I think it's far more responsible. E-commerce will has its merit for getting selection, getting empowerment of MSMEs. It is democratization of commerce. Okay, it is augmenting the commerce. It'll help us to be creating far close-knit economy. Fundamentally, this country is all about entrepreneurial spirit. It is all about innovation, and innovation at a grassroots level. Okay, and with that, we need to really make sure that we build domain expert with time. The core is people aspect. How do we build deep supply chain experts for e-commerce, logistics? These are really important to create it far more efficient. So I think For e-commerce, it's all about commerce and supply chain. Supply chain is becoming a competitive advantage. Technology, which is tailored for India, is what is essential. Our commitment for sustainability has to be starting from every corporate leader. It has to be a center stage agenda for business. As much as business is important, sustainability is core to it. Sometime it will incur investment, but we have to be bold and we have to stand tall for our commitment to sustainability. So these are few perspectives, I think, for our country and for all of us. I think we have larger space. Packaging revolution is happening. You say lot of cellulose-based product coming, lot of green packaging. It is the only way. Reusable packaging, the totes. I think technology is helping all of that. Whether it is you talk about RFID-based tracking to a we moved from a, every shipment today in supply chain, it's tracked, it is orchestrated, you have visibility, you exchange information, you build a lot of trust marker, you build a lot of customer experience journey. We talked about try and buy, virtual AR, VR environment, social commerce is exploding. People, Gen Z wants to see the, kind of a social commerce or live commerce. Today, if you see, typically we have every day 9 live commerce show running wherein new product gets launched, people experience the product and you see exciting offers, exciting experience journey. There is influencer ecosystem. I think it's a time of a revolution for this country, and we can lot of next level of disruption we can pass on to the world. I think that's what keeps me optimistic. Yeah, and thanks for inviting, and it was a privilege to be part of this August gathering. Thank you.
We are coming to the end of the inaugural session, so let me give you the concluding remarks. Distinguished speakers, invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I think a couple of things which is going to be very important in the next couple of years is, one, India is a sweet spot, and all the speakers out here, and we hear it every day, everywhere that we consume content. India is the sweet spot. We are growing to become the 3rd largest economy. We are already the 5th largest. And the most important thing is, amongst all the nations currently, we are growing the fastest. So there is potential for growth overall. The second thing is we have the largest workforce or the largest youngest population in the world, which means that at one hand, it's the job of the industry, the government, everybody to create jobs for them so that they also participate in the consumption story because their lives have to be uplifted. The second part of this whole thing is this consumption is going to be what is going to trigger the economic growth as well. So it's kind of a vicious cycle where from the upliftment of the people, the consumption increases, their earning power, their disposable income goes up, and therefore they want to consume more. And what better way to consume more in whichever part of the country that you're living in is through e-commerce fulfillment, because like all the speakers spoke about it here is a country which is developing a pretty unique model in the whole e-commerce system itself, where we are saying that there will be large corporations which will try to fulfill the needs of the masses, but that will be done through a plethora of MSMEs that are there in Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5 cities. The top metros, the top industries have brought growth to these markets, but it's time that the growth becomes more widespread. All the states, all the cities, all the towns in the country should be growing faster. And if they are also going to grow and participate in this whole consumption story, e-commerce is a better way to fulfill it rather than the traditional brick and mortar. I'm not saying that brick and mortar will not exist, but I think a kind of a combination of both will deliver the aspirational needs of all the people that are going to come out with. So it's going to be pretty exciting times in the next couple of years, and all of us here are going to be geared up to be able to participate in this. On behalf of CII, I immensely thank Mr. Hemant Badri, Senior Vice President and Group of Supply Chain and Customer Experience in Flipkart. He spoke about a couple of things today. He spoke about the size of the Indian e-commerce segment, which is almost 500 million e-commerce customers, and how the MSMEs are transforming and they are coexisting. And the last thing that he spoke about was how we are going to be a very innovation-driven country. This country is known for grassroots level innovation, and how this is going to further spur growth and how things are going to change in the coming years. Thank you very much. Many thanks to Mr. Vineet Madgonkar. He is the chairman of Armstrong Demotic. He spoke very clearly about how the intra-logistics is getting reimagined. He spoke about how the tipping point for automation is when the GDP per capita touches 4,000, and the tipping point for robotics is about $10,000. Having said that, it will take some more time for India to reach, but there are still many automation projects that are there which are already in the realm of what his company is supplying, and people are using it. And we saw a product launch as well, which is going to be almost 48,000 packages per hour. So that's the kind of large-scale infra creation, both hard and soft infra, that is getting created. Thank you very much for being here today. Let me also take this opportunity to thank Mr. Varun Wadhwa, Director, Management Consulting, KPMG in India. Of course, he spoke about the global trends, he spoke about the Indian market, and he spoke about still how much potential is available. He also spoke about an important aspect of how technology is revolutionizing every aspect of our life. And we have seen it ourselves in the last 5 years or 7 years. He traced back to what it was in 2010 and what it is in 2015 and what it is now. Even now, the e-commerce penetration is just about 5 or 7%, but with just about 65 billion of the total economy of all the total retail trade of 1 trillion passing through e-commerce. When we compare it with the US or with the China, this consumption is going to definitely increase, and we will have very many sessions today lined up, almost 3 important or 4 important sessions lined up today, where you are going to hear more from the various speakers on how each aspect of the customer experience, because ultimately everybody agrees that the customer is the ultimate king, and we all need to adapt our business models, adapt our technology, and to his or her changing needs. We'll have a great day today, and I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from the experiences of the panelists, and the panelists are going to be getting a lot more engagement from you in terms of the questions or the thoughts that you have to share. Thank you very much for being here, and we now adjourn for the next session. Thank you.